unexpected risks. That's what I took out of all of this. And it's a decidedly messed up, darkly humorous story. 1985, a bloke had an unfortunate accident while tossing a massive haul of coke in duffel bags into a national forest in Georgia in the United States. Who should chance upon the illicit substance? None other than a massive black bear who quickly became addicted to the powder. She, because it was a she, could not get enough of it. And when she sensed that anything stood in her way of a next fix, she eliminated the threat. And that perceived threat came from all sorts of avenues. People who had no idea what was going on in the woods. And I'm talking about locals, tourists, a drug kingpin and his lackeys, tin pot young thieves, law enforcement officials, you name it, they were there. And what they stumbled across would literally tear them apart, limb from limb. The danger they unwittingly put themselves in was intense. So it's a comedic schlock horror written by Jimmy Warden, directed by Elizabeth Banks. That was Charlie's Angels, I think she did, didn't she, Elizabeth?
Yep.
Now, the over-the-top outrageousness, the bizarre nature of the story, well, as I say, I reckon it makes it a bit of a cult classic straight off. It's a film that will undoubtedly play to an appreciative demographic, and there was a bit of not a standing ovation, but an ovation after the movies. It knows its market. It knows how to attract their attention. It will polarise. Some are going to be appalled. The trailer alone will put them off. And I can't really say the acting's top shelf. It's there to get the job done and let the bear do its bit. And that's what the various threads are there for. They sort of intersect and collide. So, on that note, Gregory, did you sniff something in Cocaine Bear?
I call this Grizzly on crack. You might remember Grizzly was that 1976 film, starring Christopher George, and it was one of that cycle of so-called creature features that were popular in the 70s following the success of Jaws. I enjoyed this, actually, much more than I thought I would. Many of the characters are interesting, especially I like Kerry Russell as the concerned mother going into the woods to try and track down her daughter who's left school with a friend. Her character is a bit like the female bear who will do anything to protect her young cubs there. And I also enjoyed Margot Martindale as the gun-toting, foul-mouthed park ranger, a kind of dirty Harriet there. And many of the characters here I thought were quite interesting. I liked Ray Liotta in one of his final film roles there, as the local drug kingpin there. O'Shea Jackson brought a touch of humour to his role there. There were a couple of young punks there out to do some mischief there. I thought the CGI rendered bear was quite realistic at times. The gore, the blood, and the dismembered limbs are icky, but they are played for laughs here, I thought, as well. And as I said, it's a true story, but it's taken extreme liberties with the facts by the writer there. And I thought Elizabeth Banks' direction was reasonably muscular. There's no frills direction there, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
There we go. Well, I mean, and would you agree cult? The word cult is appropriate? No?
Possibly.
What about you, Dave? I mean, I reckon this is that sort of movie.
Oh, yeah, definitely. This is going to become one of those films that I think have their own little category called a stoner category. I think this film's definitely going to fit into that category.
And in terms of your thoughts about the film?
Look, I enjoyed it. It surprised me, actually. When I heard the premise of this movie, I thought I'm going to have to endure this thing because I've got to review it. But I actually ended up genuinely liking it. It mixed gory horror with comedy, which is very, very difficult to do. And normally when films do that, they divide the audience a lot. But I found this actually worked in its favour for this film. I thought the other thing that the writer did that was a difficult thing to try and achieve was to make these young teenage hoods and also drug dealers characters that the audience care about. This film wouldn't work if you didn't care if the character got away from a bear or not, but in this film, one of the young hoods ends up becoming someone that you're barracking for, the same with some of the drug dealers. So it's interesting that so many elements of this actually worked.
Yeah, I think so too. Peter, is this your sort of movie?
Look, I like schlocky films with the best of them, but this one disappointed me greatly.
Really? Okay.
Absolutely. The problem I have with this film is that it's uneven in terms of its pacing and its ideas. It tries to play up the horror in terms of this vicious alleged bear killing people left, right, and centre, although we don't see much of that at all, and the satire or comedy based on the 80s style of schlocky films that were made at that time. And I thought it didn't work combining those two things at all. I think Elizabeth Banks does a reasonable job of directing this film, but the problem is Jimmy Warden's script, which doesn't quite know whether it wants to be an homage to families and to, especially with the way the film ends, or whether it's meant to be a schlocky horror film or it's meant to be a satire or comedy. And so for me it fell between a lot of stools. I also liked Margot Martindale. I think she's the best thing in the film, and I think her character could have been developed even more. I was worried by a scene where the two kids ate the cocaine, and I thought, why is this scene in there? I found that unnecessary and inappropriate. And the rotoscoping of the bear was actually quite well done, the CGI, even though when it got a little bit too close, it looked a little obviously as CGI overlaid on an actor who was portrayed as the bear. Anyway, look, overall, I was disappointed. I would have liked something much more horrifying or something much funnier, and for me it didn't fit any of those criteria, so not so good a film as I thought it would be.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's also aimed at a particular demographic, so and yet you've said you do appreciate schlock horror, so I suppose schlock horror is one of those genres that, I mean, so funny and humor is a very, very difficult thing to get right, because some people can be offended and other people, they set out to offend. It's kind of, I found it quite appealing as well, in spite of myself. So I mean, it was one of, by the way, it's one of Ray Liotta's last movies, which is also rather sad. But he's the sort of man pulling the strings on the cocaine haul, and there's quite a large cast here. I mean, there's a lot of threads. It's all kind of confusing, but I suppose it's really contextualised by mayhem, and that's really the cornerstone of Cocaine Bear. I accepted the hijinks at face value. As a result, I appreciated the film for what it was. I mean, it's unashamedly out to push the boundaries, to provoke a reaction, and surely, if nothing else, it does that. So I'll start by giving it a 6.5. This is MA-rated Cocaine Bear at 95 minutes. Peter?
Yeah, by the way, Ray Liotta looks quite unwell in the film, I have to say, so which was very sad to see. Look, I give the film just a bare pass, 5 out of 10.
I'm growling, Peter. Right, here you go. What about you, Dave?
I'm giving it a 6 out of 10.
Okay, and Greg?
6.5 to 7 for me. I enjoyed it.
Okay, well, now Jackie, having heard the scores are between 5 and 6.5 to 7, so would you agree the average there is about 6?
Well, that sounds fair enough, except that I saw enough of this film to know that I didn't want to see it. And if I score it a 1 out of 10, that kind of changes the face of the scoring.
But I mean, I won't even hesitate. No, I won't dare ask you how much of the movie you saw, because if you didn't see a great deal of the movie,
I saw enough, and we'll leave it at that, Alex. Okay. I'm just being the voice of reason here for our listeners too.
Okay. So in other words, if we add the 1 to everything else, we're going to get a bare pass. That's what you're saying?
Yeah. Jackie found it unbearable.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
I did. Thank you for that, Greg.
You're honest, right? You had a grisly opinion on it.
Okay. No. I just... Greg, maybe you should have been the next meal ticket for this bear. Not literally. Okay. Now...